Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and you all know how much I love businesses that are making the world a better place. I believe that entrepreneurship is the vehicle through which we can impact so much good stuff, not just in the business world, but also societally. And we are joined by two incredible entrepreneurs, and I'm going to extrapolate that and just say two great people as well that really believe in the power of making the world a better place. Let me tell you all about today's guests. Their names are Victor Arias and Dan McSwain. They have got a really cool background together as well as individually, and I love the way that they've collaborated to launch something great into the world. So Victor and Dan are childhood best friends from Dallas, Texas, raised in bicultural Mexican-American households. Victor has a background in public relations and expertise in Latino audience engagement. Dan, meanwhile, has a background in politics as well as tech startups. There's a lot that I want to hear about their backstories because Dan has over 20 years of experience in politics, in startups. He focuses on young, diverse audiences. He was a part of Barack Obama's 2008 headquarters new media team and the Obama administration. He has political and philanthropic experience and networks that lead to initial investment. Victor, on the other hand, has 20 years in multicultural PR. PR is such an important thing for all of us as entrepreneurs, and it's cool seeing them bring it to their own business as well. He focuses on connecting legacy consumer brands with young, discerning Latino audiences. His expertise in audience sentiments and behaviors for hard-to-reach demographic groups, I'm sure, is a real asset for what they're doing together, which is their company. They're going to tell us all about it today. It's called Mente. It's a youth community brand. They're building a new front door for young, diverse audiences to fight loneliness through community with a positive mental health at its core. And I just want to tease to you all one thing that as soon as our team saw it on their website, we said we need to invite these two onto the show. It says it right on their website. Mente is part of a movement to free our minds. That's why we're talking about some big things here today and how entrepreneurship can be that vehicle for change. I'm excited about this one, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Victor Arias and Dan McSwain. All right, guys, I am so excited to have both of you with us here today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us, Brian.
It's funny, you guys, I'll say this on the air. That's the first public test of a team's compatibility. You didn't both just jump in over each other at the same time. So you've passed the first test. The second test is, I want to hear your backgrounds. I want to hear individually, but also collectively, how those paths collided in adulthood to launch something awesome as well. So Victor, I'm going to kick it off to you, and then Dan, pick up straight away. Who the heck are you guys? How did you start doing all this cool work?
Yeah, Brian, thank you so much. Again, we're honored to be here. I'm going to speak for Dan, who's my best friend since we were 12 years old. We both grew up together in Dallas, Texas, in a suburb called Irving. And I know for myself, my background is Mexican-American. Both of my parents grew up in El Paso, Texas, which is right there on the border. And so really day-to-day for me, growing up in two different cultures, something that's been very prevalent for me in my personal life and also in my professional life. Dan and I met again when we were 12, and we're navigating a lot of spaces where we were kind of the only ones that looked and sounded and had the cultural backgrounds that we did. And so we connected really closely. In fact, Dan always likes to tell this story that when we were in middle school and high school, we looked very similar back when I had hair, and the teachers and other parents used to get us confused. And so as a result, his mom used to lovingly refer to us as los Gemelos, which means the twins. And that's still stayed as a little nickname that Dan and I have for each other. So we are very much connected still through our friendship, through our family, and now through this company that we've started called Mente. After growing up in Dallas, I was one of those people that was like, I know there's more out there than just Dallas, Texas. I need to experience some other things. I went to grad school at Notre Dame, which then led me to the East Coast. I actually lived in Washington, D.C. for about 4 years, working kind of in the Hispanic space, communication space, with some nonprofits and government clients. And then after that, I moved to New York City to work at Edelman, which is a very large, one of the largest public relations firms globally. And there I was really able to kind of sharpen my skills. I worked on huge brands like Heineken, a lot of Unilever consumer brands, PayPal, Venmo. There were a number of them. And every single time I was really in a unique position to kind of raise my hand and say, well, how are we thinking about engaging young Latino audiences? I know everybody wants to reach Gen Z, but there's got to be a smarter way to try to engage diverse kids that makes it feel like they're being spoken to explicitly, something that I never felt I had growing up as a consumer, right? So I've always kind of infused that and brought that with me on every brand that I've worked on. I now live in LA. I have a small growing family. And so even coming out here, continuing my PR career, I worked on McDonald's actually as my last client. And it was a really amazing fit because they wanted to show up more authentically for Latinos here in Southern California. And so one of the most proud campaigns that I helped bring to them was we hosted lowrider meetups at a number of McDonald's restaurants in Latino areas like Boyle Heights and Oxnard, California, and San Diego. And that was really an amazing kind of eye-opener for me, just to understand the power of the Latino consumers, and even seeing that everybody shows up as a family, as very much a family-oriented campaign that we ran, and it drove foot traffic into stores, into restaurants that they really hadn't seen, especially post-pandemic. So for me, that was something extremely rewarding. But I will tell you that the pandemic for me was really a tough for my mental health, and just tough for me in general. And Dan was one of the only people I could turn to kind of talk about these things in terms of my mental health journey. And a lot of the things that I was trying to figure out that was going on, some of those things were cultural barriers that I needed to deal with before even finding the help that I needed. So that's kind of the kernel of what started Dan and I's path on finding each other and finding a common ground to start what we've been doing with Mente. But with that as a teaser, I'm going to turn it over to my gemelo, Dan.
Thanks, dude. As Victor said, we grew up together. That experience in Texas was really formative. We really shared a love for culture. And that's one of the things that when we were reconnecting to start Mente together over the last number of months, we were talking a lot about the explosive cultural influence that Latino culture has, not just in Spanish speakers and not just in the United States, but across the world. And so we were looking at, our shared love of music, of food, of fashion, of film, and sort of asking ourselves, Latino culture is so influential in all of these categories. How might Mente bring some of those traditions that our community has had and maintained for thousands of years to a general audience? I became really interested in building something that had Latino culture at its core over the last number of years, but that's been a part of my professional life for quite some time. Just a little bit of background on that. I started in a music startup in 2005 where the U.S. Copyright Office changed royalty rates for our business and for our industry, and was going to threaten to bankrupt all of us because it was totally upside down. So I started going to Washington as a grassroots lobbyist to meet with House Energy and Commerce Committee members and try and persuade them that growing the internet radio industry was good for consumers, good for artists, and something that they could help fix. Sort of lit my interest in in organizing, in lobbying, and in politics. I joined Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign, as I think you said in the intro, Brian, and came to Washington as part of his administration. So I spent most of the last 15 years here in Washington. And I think that perspective on how laws and policies get made, and how they impact different communities, and sort of what the relationship is between culture and politics and policymaking, is definitely at the heart of what we're trying to do with Mente. It's been a really fun experience over the last number of months to build on the friendship that Victor and I have now as co-founders, having spent a lot of time together over the last number of decades, but never actually working together. I would say, from my perspective, one of the things that's been the most interesting and the most fun to experience is just how quickly we're able to move when we are operating on a foundation of deep trust like this. Right? There's a lot of things, especially really early on, where we could cycle through ideas together, give each other feedback really quickly and openly, and get from a cold start into some real motion and momentum as we've built the company. I would say our friendship is the real sort of foundation of that. It's been super fun so far to operate that way.
Yeah, gosh, guys, I love those overviews from both of you. There's only one qualm I have with that overview, and that's with you, Dan, because you mentioned how much the Latin cultural impact has been you mentioned food, you mentioned entertainment. You failed to mention the beautiful game of soccer. And having been to so many LAFC games, Victor, I'm sure that you can relate to this. It truly, Latino culture permeates so many different facets of just American life in general, and of course, all around the globe as well. And so I love the fact that both of you, that was a source of unity, and we're learning some Spanish words here with having the twins on the air. I really appreciate that backstory. Victor, you took us all the way back to the pandemic and talked about something that is very real for all of us, the mental health that we all went through. Actually, I think I'm going to put Dan on the spot to kick this question off, because what I really love about the two of you is that you didn't just experience those feelings. The two of you sat in them together and said, let's do something about this. Let's actually impact change here. And the reason why I'm going to pick on Dan for a second is because I feel like in a lot of times in a national discourse, if you turn the news on and you listen to the media, the answer is always, we need to politically make a charge, and we need to use the powers of institutions in order to do these things. You two are doing it on your own accord. You are, I love that quote of be the change that you wish to see in the world. You two are examples of exactly that. So Dan, I want to hear, with that political hat on, but also turned entrepreneur, why is entrepreneurship? Why is what you two are doing independently with Mente? Why is that the way forward to solve these huge societal issues? And then Victor, I'd love for you to chime in with that PR hat as well, because obviously there's so many vehicles through which we can enact this change.
Yeah, sure. Mente is part of a movement to free our minds. We came to feel very strongly about that in the sort of process of research and discovery that we undertook in order to start the company. And like Victor was saying, Victor and I connected over our own mental health challenges that, became really acute and something that we had to pay a lot of attention to over the last number of years. And we were really floored by how challenging the experience was to find care that made sense to us, that was accessible to us, that was covered at least in part by insurance, that took our own culture and upbringings into account. And we realized, as men in America, where things are pretty easy for people like us with a ton of privilege, this was extremely difficult. And that if it was difficult for us, it was going to be pretty near impossible for a lot of people, not just from the Latino community, but everybody. So we got really inspired by that. That plus the backdrop of the Latino cultural influence wave that every category seems to be riding, and the experience of being dads with young kids and looking at the data for youth mental health and looking at all the challenges that young people have that previous generations have not had to deal with in the same way. And selfishly saying like, hey, our kids they're growing up into this world, their friends, the communities that they're a part of, this is going to be a big challenge for them. And we got really excited and feel very grateful that this is the challenge that we get to spend our time working to be a solution towards.
Yeah, Brian, I think for me the main issue from a PR perspective is trust or lack thereof, right? So trust in institutions. Dan and I like to refer back to the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is publicly released every year, and they typically measure the level of trust that consumers have in institutions. And by far, younger generations, this is not surprising, have lower trust in institutions across the board. That includes media, that includes healthcare. Something that we found when thinking about these younger audiences and not just ourselves is that not only do they have a high distrust for these existing institutions, but they also feel like they are able to make their own health decisions on their own. I think the number is something like 59%, right, Dan? So that really stood out to us as we kind of looked at everything that these audiences are dealing with, these younger audiences. And I think that's what made us really fired up about, can we start something? Can we start a brand, a movement, something that is rooted in our community that makes these younger, more diverse generations feel like, oh, they actually get us, or they understand this other cultural component that's very important to us in addressing mental health, but that also kind of offers this other way, maybe to the help they need traditionally, or to other people, other community members, and maybe offering ways to not feel as lonely going through these experiences. And maybe that's through in real life experiences and on social media with content that is actually a resource, or that is positive for my mental health, as opposed to all the negative things that we know these kids are dealing with every day in terms of doom scrolling and misinformation and things that just make you feel bad about yourself. So those things were really, I think, what got us most fired up to start something as quickly as we did.
Yeah, and hearing you both talk about the solution that you've brought to the market, Victor, you said, can we launch something into the world to address these? Yes, you can, and you guys have, and I want to talk about some numbers and the things you've already been able to accomplish with Mente, because it's incredible the impact that you had. Dan, when you talk about bringing a solution to the marketplace, I love that, because that's true entrepreneurial thinking. That is not only seeing a problem, which it's easy to find problems in today's world, but the most important part is being part of that solution. You guys have impacted, and I'm going to round up because as an entrepreneur myself for 16 years, I know that all of these numbers, the reach goes far beyond that. You've had thousands of people show up to your in-person events. You've had tens of thousands of people sign up to your SMS list. And so if we look across the entire spectrum, you've helped 100,000 people. This is not theory that we're talking about. This is real life lives that you're impacting. And Victor, you talk about, it's two important things for us to focus on, which is the online stuff as well as the in real life. I want to hear from the two of you how intentional and strategic you've been about the way that you've set Mente up and the way, to Dan's point, that you want to bring this solution to the world. What is the structure? What's the framework or the mechanism through which you're making the world a better place with all these things?
You want to take that, Hemi?
Yeah, sure, dude. So in the spring of this year, we were really fortunate to receive support from Reid Hoffman and his team to help us launch Mente as a way to better understand what young, diverse communities are going through as they navigate, like Victor, I think, very accurately described, a dissolution in their faith in a number of institutions, and a lot of the challenges and burdens that come from the mental health crisis that so many young people across America are experiencing. We decided to launch in Phoenix, Arizona. It's a very exciting, young, diverse market. It's also cheaper to operate in than a lot of its comparably diverse and dynamic markets. And it's a place where over the last 20 years, civic engagement and young people have played a big role in shaping the culture and the policy landscapes of that geography. So as a couple of elder millennials, we wanted to go and build a young, diverse team that had some of the lived experiences that parts of our audiences were going through. And we decided to build Mente there. And that was really, I think that was a bet that we made that was a lot of gut and intuition and some data that we had access to. And I'm really proud of the way that the brand has grown in that community, right? We see the success of the solution really riding on the question that Victor prompted earlier is, can we be a trusted brand that can authentically engage an audience that is hard to reach and slow to trust? And can they grow with us over time so that we can bring institutions closer to them and them closer to institutions, especially around the questions of health, right? So much of what the mental health crisis means for young people is subclinical. So, stress, some forms of depression and anxiety, social pressure. But, we know that these subclinical conditions can get worse over time, and if they're untreated, can turn into severe mental illness. And so, being a brand that our audience trusts, that they can see themselves in, that they can authentically engage with and direct. Mente is built by our communities for our communities. We're just really grateful to be playing this role with this community right now as they chart their future to take their mental health back into their own hands.
Yeah, when I think about that, it's so fascinating to me because, well, one, I'm obviously a business junkie. I love business metrics. I love marketing. I love advertising. Dan, you so succinctly articulated something there. I've never heard anyone say it that way, which is they're hard to reach and slow to trust. And that's so important because when we think about, I'm going to use the word customers, but of course, our customers are anyone who we're meant to serve and we're meant to impact. And so when I look at some of the numbers that you guys have shared with me behind the scenes, there's so much traction there. It just seems to me when I look at your cost per acquisition for a new Mente customer or community member, they're excited to jump on board. What are they finding inside of the world of Mente? What do these in real life events look like? What does the online component of it? How exactly is it changing the game for these people?
Yeah, Brian, that's a great question. We really took. So first of all, in terms of the content, we knew that we had to start there quickly because these younger audiences, that is where they live. That is where they get their news. That's where they get their entertainment. That's where they get their information. So for us, social media was kind of one of the first things that we thought about in terms of launching the brand or making it real for people. We, like Dan said, were very intentional about hiring staff to our team that reflect the audiences that we're trying to engage. And in turn, we also hire we partner with a diverse roster of content creators to put out content, mental health related content and resources that are good for your mental health. That is kind of like our North Star in terms of the content that we put out and the people that we partner with from a social perspective. And so that is kind of our always on strategy. That is something that we've mapped out for a long time. And then it's something that we use to promote when we show up in the community in Phoenix. We launched in the spring with a bang. We actually showed up at the first ever Corridos Mexican music festival in the United States. So corridos, think Peso Pluma, right? So that type of music, that style of music. There was a 2-day music festival in Chandler, Arizona, out there in the desert. We built a New York City style bodega. And there we had a bunch of different things that we were giving away. And our whole kind of premise for that was, well, look, if we want to talk to people about heavy subjects like mental health or staying engaged in your community or even this election coming up, we need to make sure that they feel like their basic needs are met first, right? A lot of people are struggling. We need to meet them where they are. So we had water to give away. We had cooling towels. We had some other fun things like a boot shine station, because we know all those cowboy boots were going to be getting dusty over there in the desert. We had a glam station. We had T-shirts. We showed up and just tried to just be authentic. And I think it worked, because a lot of people signed up to our list. They wanted to learn more. They wanted to follow Mente. They wanted to get more resources. We got qualitatively, they shared a lot of very personal stories with us about some of the struggles that they had. I remember hearing a lot of kids saying, like, I can barely afford certain things. I have 2 jobs, and just coming to this music festival was a mental health thing that I'm doing for myself and for my friends, right? So we knew we were onto something. We continued to look at other cultural moments in Arizona. We were lucky enough to partner with a pretty well established brand, a women's sports brand called Together, founded by former professional athletes. And we partnered with them they asked us to basically put on a wellness festival in downtown Phoenix, tied to the WNBA All-Star game there in the summer. And we took over a hotel. We took over their pool. We basically threw a wellness pool party so that people could cool off, connect with each other, and kind of have a moment of respite. And so that was a huge win for us. We've also we partnered with Don't Tell Comedy, and we put on a 3-day comedy festival at different locations, different kind of unexpected locations in the Phoenix area. So again, we're trying to kind of tap into these behaviors, these cultural norms that we know these audiences are passionate about, meet them where they are, serve their basic needs, have these conversations, give them something, give them resources to take their mental health journeys into their own hands. And I think when we do that, we notice that we're actually building community. All these people now have something in common hopefully through Mente and those experiences, where they can find each other and connect and have more of a holistic experience that we were trying to form anyway.
Dan, I spy you unmuting yourself. Is there something you want to add there?
Yeah, I'd say the only thing I wanted to add is the through line between the content and the physical experiences, the thing that is pulling the community together and driving them to engage is that they're seeking healing, right? I think this was a real insight that our team discovered and mined over the course of this year. Again, a lot of intuition, a lot of data that comes from the team, the creative team, to pull together the brand. Luis, one of our creative directors, said this in the way that I'll never forget, that Mente is a feeling. And I think we're really figuring out what that feeling is for our community. That community is really seeking to take healing back into their own hands, right? That doesn't mean, for everybody, that doesn't mean a therapist. For everybody, that doesn't mean a doctor. For everybody, that doesn't mean the same thing. Everybody's healing journey is different. But what we found is that there's a lot of demand, especially inside of subsegments of our audience, for this kind of content, for this kind of experience, something that helps them feel less lonely, something that helps them feel like a greater sense of belonging, something that helps them feel connected to each other and connected to themselves, and to discover the sort of power of community building to heal themselves and the people in the world around them. I think that's been one of the most exciting parts of this journey so far, and a piece that we're very excited to keep building on.
Yeah, I really appreciate the way that both of you speak about it. Victor, I'm going to pick on something that you said there. You used the word authentic, and I feel like I say this so much to especially newer entrepreneurs is when they're wondering, who should I serve? I'm missing a business idea. That's the one thing that always makes me laugh, because in my head, I just think to myself, serve either a past, present, or future version of yourself. There's nobody else that you understand more than yourself and your community and the way that you were raised. And so, Victor, when you talk about the way that not only you two, but Mente shows up authentically for the people that you serve, it comes easy to you. You don't have to think about it too much, because it's serving a past version of both of you and probably a present version of both of you as well. I mean, when you list, Don't Tell Comedy is such a cool company. I'm glad that they've also made made their way here to Tampa, Florida. It's so cool. It brightens the spirit, and the fact that you two can just, I'm going to call it effortlessly, but I know a lot of work goes into it. You two can just effortlessly ask yourself, how can we make people feel better? How can we bring people together so that they leave feeling better than when they arrived? And it's something that you two are doing, that important work. So huge kudos to the two of you. I always love asking this question at the end of interviews because it's super broad. And today we're getting a double dose because we've got two of you here. And that is, what's your best piece of advice? The one takeaway, knowing that we're being listened to by entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys and in 150 countries around the world. What's the one thing that you want to impart on them? Because you two are not just subject matter experts doing the work with Mente. You're also one of us. You're also fellow entrepreneurs. So, Victor, I'm going to kick it over to you because you're already unmuted. So, Victor, give us that one thing, and then Dan, straight over to you. Leave us with that extra piece of advice.
You know, for me, man, this is it's a very real question, Brian. I really appreciate it. I think it's you're stronger than you think, and don't be afraid of the unknown. I think that there's so many, you know, you're kind of jumping into the deep end, right? There's all these metaphors that people use when you go into entrepreneurship. And I think one of the hard things is maybe you're leaving a previous life or career behind, or you're having to learn new things, new skills, new industries, new markets. And even in that way, you're kind of learning a new role for yourself. And sometimes that's scary, right? Especially as Dan very nicely put it, elder millennials. You know, once you get to a certain point in your career with a lot of experience, you're kind of like, well, now I can build on this. I already have a foundation, but it can be a little scary to kind of move away from that and be open to learning new things and experiencing new things and having to almost create a new identity for yourself. But I can tell you it's super exciting, and I'm super thankful for this opportunity. And I'm extremely thankful to my best friend, Dan, for kind of allowing me to go through that journey together.
Oh man, you took what I was going to say.
Shocked.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, mine is just to bet on yourselves. You know, Victor and I, when we started talking about Mente together, we felt really strongly about doing this very quickly. And, you know, we've each gone through different phases of our career. Some things have worked out, some things haven't worked out. We've learned a ton. And all of those things happening in the way that they did, at the timing that they did, led us to this opportunity. And we had to make a decision. Were we going to like passively sort of inspect this opportunity, or were we going to go all in on it? And we decided to bet on ourselves, and it's the best decision that I've made in some time.
Yes, absolutely. Gosh, guys, I love the fact that the both of you have shown up in full transparency and just deeply authentically yourselves. I really appreciate the way that you both do that personally. I appreciate the way you do that as a brand, as a company, and the way that you really are showing up in service of others. I think that it's been on full display from start to finish here in today's conversation. So I'm so appreciative of that. I'm a big fan of the work that you're all doing. It's incredibly important. Again, I just want you guys to expand. That you all know, I know that you're big dreamers, so make your way over here to the East Coast. Dan, you're a fellow East Coaster as well, so looking forward to those expansions. With that in mind, where can people go to follow along with all the great work that you're doing? Drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, check out mente.world, the website, and mente.world on Instagram and on TikTok. And stay tuned. We have big plans for the coming years, expanding the model and connecting with like-minded brands and communities. So we'll see you soon.
Yes, listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links down below in the show notes. You'll be able to click right on through to Mente's website. You'll also find their social media links, and we're also linking to Victor and Dan's personal LinkedIns as well. So if this is something that you say, holy cow, I want to collaborate with them, I want to partner with them, or I want to introduce them to someone who can accelerate it, or I want to be a part of their community. For all of those reasons, reach out, continue the conversation. These are two dudes who firmly believe in the power of doing more good, and they're doing it through their company. So to both of you, Victor, Dan, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Thanks, man.